Hello, hello. Welcome you all. I'm so excited to have you all here in one room. I see familiar faces. I also see people I would love to meet and connect with. But this is amazing to be able to have such an intimate event with two of my favorite people, Kanjun and Zhuo. Welcome everyone. I'll move over here, maybe because everybody is facing this side. Please, Eshan, come. Lauren. All right, so we're all here to talk about how to preserve craft when designing with AI. It's a topic that's top of mind for a lot of our leaders, design, product, engineering. We're moving towards a chapter where actually we move towards a chapter where agents are our partners. And we are working alongside agents. How do we preserve craft? How do we how do we keep that intentionality in our work? And how do we have human agency still in this chapter? My name is Julie Stanescu. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of Rethink and one of your hosts tonight. And I'm here with Eshan and Lauren. They are part of the Imbue team. We've organized this for you tonight, and we hope you are having a great time. We hope you will meet great people. We hope you will have great conversations. The reason why I'm hosting this is because I felt the need, especially after COVID, to have a more intimate space where we have these conversations, where we build relationships, where we network with people who have the same challenges, same struggles with us. And you are here for this conversation. I hope it is inspiring for you by the end of the session, and I hope you will meet at least 3 people that you will have as great connections moving on. I want to thank to our partner and sponsor for tonight, Imbue. They've done an amazing job hosting us, providing the space, and planning along with me on this for this evening. Eshan, if you want to say a couple of things.
Sure. Yeah, thank you all for coming to Imbue. This wouldn't be possible without all of you making the effort to come. I get invited to these things and I know it's effort, so I just wanted to acknowledge the effort everyone made to block this off on their calendar and then actually show up. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I had been to a ton of Rethink events before COVID, and I really enjoyed them. And then Julie sent out an email a while ago, and I just responded thinking she wouldn't respond to me. But then she came over for lunch, and we just started chatting about what we could do. So yeah, my name's Ehsan. I'm a founding product designer here at Imbue. Been here for a year and 3 months. I'm the only product designer at Imbue. Lauren is our only brand designer at Imbue. Yeah. And Imbue, I think we're really doing a lot of interesting things in a non-traditional startup way, right? Kanjun, I think, is going to talk a lot more about this. And it's been a blast trying to figure out how to make these agents work better for software engineers, for people, and how to just make them more useful in this new world that we're barreling towards. And so yeah, all day I'm thinking about primarily how to make better AI coding experiences for software engineers, specifically engineers who are already familiar with all the coding techniques and best practices and everything, but trying to make their experience so much better. But at the start of this year, we started a really interesting experiment, trying out a very different approach where we've started many projects at Imbue, so it's not just one thing anymore. And so it's wonderful to have everyone here to bring in the new ideas and discussions. We'll have various Imbue team members at the dinner, maybe bouncing ideas off of you, getting feedback. But there's just so much possibility now and so much easier to build ideas that we're really trying to reduce the barriers of how Imbue works, of how we build things, and so it's just wonderful to bring new people into the space and share different ideas. And yeah, I think for me, it's like a selfish thing. As a team of one designer, team of one brand designer, I want other designers and builders in the space. So it's very selfish. I feel very happy that you all came here. And special thanks to everyone on Imbue's ops team that made this all possible. I just sent an email. Yeah, Michelle, don't run away. She was running away on purpose. She did all the work with her team. Kathy, Lauren, Julie. I just sent an email and I was given the mic. So I take no credit other than being happy that you all are here. Lauren, do you want to add anything?
No, I think we should get started. But if you are interested in hosting an event and you don't have a space for an event, Brand at Imbue is really looking to have more events here. So come talk to me, and I'd love to chat about what you're thinking.
And if you are interested to organize a dinner like this, I can help you to organize one for your teams or organize something as part of the community. We connect senior product leaders in product, design, and engineering through experiences like this and also through online learning experiences. And without further ado, I'd love for you to meet our guests tonight, Julie Zhuo, CEO at Sundial, and Kanjun, CEO and co-founder at Imbue. I will just start. Let's start the conversation. Yeah. So the format tonight will be, we're going to have a casual formal conversation for about 45 minutes, and there will be time and space for you to ask questions, and there will be a conversation between Kanjun and Julie. And after that, we're switching to the dinner table, where we're going to continue networking and the discussion. All right. Welcome. Enjoy.
Hey. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, and Asan, and Lauren, and Michelle, and Kathy, and everyone who helped with this event. Actually, before we get started, so Julie and I are going to have a pretty casual conversation talking about thoughts on agency, design, product, AI. We have a lot of experience building AI agents at Imbue. It's something I think about a lot. And Julie has a lot of experience in product design and product building. But before we get started, I'm really curious, what is on your mind? Like, what is like a question you're still trying to figure out in this age, thinking about this year? I think I feel like I have a pretty good sense of where capabilities are going by the end of this year. And you might be able to guess it as well. And so, yeah, I'm curious thinking about, your work, your life, your children, the future. Like, what are you wondering? Just, popcorn style. Raise your hand. Just go ahead.
Hey, I'm Leslie Yang. I work at Lyft. My question that I've been thinking about for our teams is, how do we ensure we maintain a high quality of critical thinking as tech people on tech teams, as tech leaders, versus giving AI all the heavy-duty analysis and thinking when we learn so much when we think on our own? So how do we find that balance? So that's top of mind for me.
Something that's top of mind. My name's Anisha Jane, and I just started at a bridge, and I've been there for a week, and I've already seen sort of the proliferation of AI prototyping all over the place and amongst non-design functions. And I sort of something I've been thinking about is sort of how does design sit in that ecosystem, and how much do we lean into that versus differentiating ourselves a little bit in what expertise we bring to the table.
I'm Joel, and I work at Anthropic. If engineers are going like 10 or 100x faster, and PMs are writing things 10 or 100x faster, I feel like we haven't figured out how to make design go 10 or 100x faster, and it feels like the social cost of asking for time to like think is extremely high. So I'm curious to get into that.
Hi, I'm Mahmoud. I'm a founder of FinFam, but previously at Stripe. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on sort of the limits of trust, right? Like, we understand that developers are moving a lot faster, product managers are moving a lot faster. We trust them with aspects of our job, but what about like other functions and people writ large? Like, are we so sure that they're going to trust as quickly as developers trusted when we originated this technology? All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Fonz. I want to know, do you feel that the designer, engineer, product manager role is actually converging into being one role moving forward? There was a really interesting discussion that I saw on X about that. Like, and I feel like I'm on both sides, so I'm just wondering, like, do you think that, is that better for the industry and the craft, or should we be able to keep that distinction?
This is great. Go ahead.
Jess Clark, I'm at Shopify. I'm curious to hear people's thoughts on what being a tastemaker looks like in this new thing and what the output of that tastemaking is. Right now, I'm seeing that as like being the best one to write the best rules, but now I'm like sitting in text because I know how to explain what I want to see. So like what does a designer tastemaker output look like in the new world?
Okay, this is a great seat of questions.
I feel like we'll have a lot of great dinner conversations.
Seriously, I don't know if we can answer all of these. Maybe we'll get started and try to touch on a bunch of these topics through our conversation. We want to center our conversation around agency in the beginning and kind of how humans can have power in this world. So it gets to some questions about taste, decision making, how do you scale yourself, et cetera.
Let's get started.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have, maybe we'll just start with some quick kind of downloads of what we're thinking about, each of us, and then start the conversation. So Julie, I want to know more about you. You were at Facebook back before it was Meta, and very early there, and you wrote a book on design, on product design, management, and then you started a company, Sundial. So would love to hear a little bit about kind of what are you thinking about right now? What does Sundial do? And how are you thinking about design and product development there?
So I like to tell a story of I've basically been like an imposter my whole life. I was an immigrant here. When I started my career, I was an engineer that very quickly transferred onto the design team, not really having learned a lot of foundations in design, and kind of had to work my way through that. At a certain point, I was somehow asked to manage the team, no training, started becoming a manager. And then after I grew the design team at Facebook, I left to start a company. And the company is actually a data company. It's an analytics company. So Sundial, what we try to do is we try to automate a lot of analysis so that we can really shorten time to better and faster decisions. I think what always interested me about that, and maybe the through line of all of this, is this, I do think agency and empowerment and how we learn and grow and continue to challenge ourselves as humans is a huge part of, I think what really drives me. I love learning, I love being in kind of that uncomfortable zone. And I think that now, starting a company and running a company, I think so much of what we grapple with is uncertainty. And I think that's true right now for the entire world. We're dealing with more and more uncertainty because change is just happening faster and faster, right? Maybe change was always happening, but it just felt that maybe, technology come along and then it takes 30 years to propagate, and now something happens and then, everything changes. And I think right now we're all feeling that. I feel a great sense of uncertainty. I can't even, I went and did a board meeting last week, and it's very difficult to predict where we're going to be at the end of 2026. I was asked to present a financial plan, and frankly, I didn't have a lot of confidence in where things were going to go. But I also know, talking to many other people, we're in that zone right now of I think everyone feels a bit of that paranoia, and everyone feels a little bit of what does that mean? And I think that was also why I was really drawn to working on something like Sundial, because ultimately we take a lot of decisions. And we want the decisions to be certain. We wish we could just know, I'll pick path A. I'll know if I join this company, great things will happen. I'll do this job, I'll make this product decision, and all the users will love us. But it's never going to be solved. We're never actually going to be faced with maybe certainty of any kind. I think the best we can do is try to ask ourselves, what tools do we have and how do we create that? How do we create a greater sense of stability and grounding? And I think that's a lot of why companies invest so much in data. Tons of money, tons of people, energy into trying to maybe have data or having data reflect reality such that it gives us a more true lens on what's really happening. Because if we have a more grounded ability to know what's happening, then maybe we can make better decisions. And so I find myself just really thinking about that in our work, and I think that's kind of our North Star, is how do we help decision makers really feel, not certainty per se, but just a little more conviction in the fact that we can make decisions in spite of certainty. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking a lot about how teams are changing. And this is true for our own team. Like Claude Code came out, and like suddenly everyone, everywhere in tech companies is building like insane things. And so, what does that mean for how we do our work? And a lot of, I think the sentiments here are very much how I'm thinking about how do we structure our teams? And we're running a lot of experiments, which we can talk a little bit more about. But that's certainly something that's very top of mind as well.
Yeah, so, there was a question about taste, and I think data and design often don't seem like they go together, but data informs how you make decisions, and that is taste. Taste is what decisions you make, right?
I think about it as often data is diagnostic. So it helps us understand what's really happening. I think the best data, and I think of data not just numbers, analytical, what are people doing, but also talking to customers is data. Observing what customers are doing, a salesperson having a conversation or a customer success person talking to a customer. It's all data, right? It's all information. And at its best, the information gives us a much more clear sense of what's truly happening so that we can understand what are the problems and what are the opportunities. And that's diagnostic. But data is not going to tell us what we should do about it. How should we solve the problem? And I think that still requires that creative leap. So we often say we diagnose with data and we treat with design. That's still where the work of solutions and where having to understand well enough the problem so that we can come up with the best solutions comes out. And actually the best designers that I know, they're very similar in their ethos to the best data people, right? The best designers want to know what reality is. I always used to joke that I'm sure that of all of us who've been in design profession, if we had a magic wand and we could just suddenly read the minds of all of our users or customers, that would be amazing. That would be the best thing, because then we would actually know what was really going on and how they were really feeling, and then we could design the best products ever. And so we want that. We want that reality. We want that truth. But we can't, so we have to rely on proxies. And the proxies, sometimes are right, sometimes are wrong. But I think that's the work for us. Is how does the proxies get better and better so that we can really know what we're dealing with, so that we can really come up with the best inventions. Well, I'm really curious about how you define agency, because you spend a lot of time working with agents, and that's been a lot of the ethos of Imbue. How do you even think about it? How do you define it?
Yeah, Imbue is a pretty radical AI company, I think. We're very fortunate to have a very profitable core business, and we're very mission-oriented. So our mission is to make tech serve humans. And when I think about agency, we started the company because we saw with AI that there's likely to be this massive platform centralization, and that the LLM providers will kind of verticalize, and agents will be kind of part of that verticalization. And so maybe all of your AI employees that you're using are going to be made by OpenAI or Claude, Anthropic, and Imbue, what I really believe in is what I want to see is a future where technology, AI, agents serve us and they don't exploit us. So where software is today I worry about being exploited by software, and it does exploit me. It grabs my attention. I don't like my phone. I put it outside my bedroom at night. These are indicative of the objects on our phone having incentives that are a little bit misaligned with ours. And that kind of incentive misalignment, it is not just in the technology, it's unfortunately in the entities that create the technology. And so at Imbue, we're really trying to figure out how do we build a future that fights these monopoly effects? And how do we end up not having this kind of verticalization? And in that world, like what we want for human agency is for agents and software to be a tool in the way that a hammer is a tool. Like I've never once thought about or worried about my hammer exploiting me, fortunately. And that should be the case with software, and even with very intelligent software. And so at Imbue, a lot of how we think about agency is, okay, like we think right now we want to build an open agent ecosystem that is trustworthy, where agents are understandable, modifiable, and accountable, like verifiable, to the end user. And that means things like, preferring local data, having all your data be exportable. We shipped a thing that lets you run a bunch of agents called Sculptor, run a bunch of agents locally on your computer, runs Cloud Code in parallel, and it gives you a lot more control. We're building a lot of other products in parallel. One of the things we shipped last week was just an open source authentication tool that basically lets your agent access whatever authentication you as a user have access to. So if I, on my computer, am authenticated to Slack and to Salesforce, then I can have my agent also use Slack and Salesforce without having to go through some centralized channel, or without having my agent to have like partnership integrations with these services. And so that's these are things that move toward a decentralization of power, and that's really what we're interested in. I think one of the things that you talked about that I'd be curious to talk more about is how we structure our companies in this new world. For example, at Imbue, Asan referenced this a little bit. We just recently, on January 4th, started having not just one product or two projects, but 11. And we have a team structure where project teams are 1 to 3 people, all engineers. Asan is like a central design function that like works with a bunch of different projects when they need it. Engineers are prototyping and building, and some stuff has shipped within 2 weeks. And we try to get people to run Cloud Code as much as possible overnight. And this is just such a different way of working, engineers being 100x'd. I think one of the things that I found interesting is that the bottleneck is now decision making. It's not execution speed. And so a team that's bigger than 3 people, it's much harder to make decisions fast. And so that's just kind of one of the things that we've been thinking about, like having lots of things that ship, having a company model that supports having lots of things that ship independently, that like integrate nicely with each other, but are really independent products run by independent people. I'm curious what experiments you're running.
Yeah, I really love when you told me about that. Like, it's kind of like the rule of 3. Like teams shouldn't be more than 3 people in order to keep that. Right now, we're kind of like in sprint mode. So one of the things that we tried to do is like we had projects, we had roadmaps. We were like doing kind of monthly road mapping, which like kind of laddered into quarterly, and then we're like, okay, we're tossing all of that out the window. Like we just kind of have to almost like live day by day. So now we're doing like sprints again, and very similarly, one of the things that was really interesting is that I felt like in the old model, right? And I wrote a book about management, so I think a lot about like teams and managing. I felt like the way that teams or like companies got more done is like, okay, you're gonna have to hire more people, and then the people who like know a lot of their job has to be spent trying to onboard newer people and giving them context and training them, or whatever, giving them whatever they needed, right? So it's like people go into kind of tech lead roles or like tech manager roles or management roles, and I really think that like what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 months, it feels like the future really advantages the builder. It really advantages the people who are not really coordinating or managing, but can get more done. So one of the experiments that we started running some weeks ago was like, hey, we have like, the most senior engineers of our company. And again, they were all kind of playing this tech lead role. And we were just like, what if we just made it so like nobody could talk to them? And they have no more meetings, and they just have like 5 or 6 hours to code every day. Like, would more things get done? And like so far the answer is yes. Like it's like more stuff is getting done. These engineers are like, oh my gosh, like I feel like one of our tech leaders was like, I feel like like a superhero. Like I feel like I can actually I'm like able to do so much more because, this person has all the context about, like, he's been long tenured, he knows like what needs to be done. And I think there was always a frustration of like, I need to pass that context on to another human being. And now you can just like make it happen. And so I think very similar to you, like I think it allows us to start to think about like, well, what can we do in parallel, and like almost like how do we design things that work really well together. And so it really makes us think about projects in kind of a different way. Like it's not just like from a user perspective, but like how can we make this as independent as possible, and like have like very clear APIs between other teams for how they need to work together. And then I think like, for example, our designers or other people, like they're trying to spend more time actually trying to encode like what are our design guidelines, like what is it that we consider good, so like these other teams can be more freed up to kind of execute without having to then sit down and have like a consultation. So it's everyone's like kind of thinking about like how do these things scale and how do we like write that in. And I think the other thing that's really important is like how do we have like a compounding system, because sometimes we'll do something and it doesn't work, right? Like the agent messes up, it doesn't do a good job, whether it's like an analysis or whether it's like some piece of code that it's writing, or it doesn't do a great job on like designing some kind of front end and UI. And so then there's work, like I do think it's really important to be like, okay, let's like debug that and let's try and figure out what it is and how we can then update the system of like various contexts or prompts. And I think like just better system, better context for like how things work allows the teams to go much further. And like this is still like a very creative endeavor. I feel like it still feels like you have to like really put your critical thinking brain on and like ask like, how do I make it so that next time the agent that's working will like do this in a better way. So that's one of the areas I think our team has been like trying a lot of things and actually finding it very fun to do.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. As you were talking, I thought of kind of two observations I've made around both design and engineering. I don't know what to do with PMs. We'll get there. But on the design side, one thing that we've done with Sculptor, Isan kind of approached with Sculptor is a coding agent product, helps you run coding agents in parallel, and has a bunch of panels. But our engineers are like, oh, well, like we want to add a bunch of new things. Like we want to add this workflow, that workflow. We want to add buttons. And so Isan actually, from a design perspective, has redesigned Sculptor to think in terms of like, okay, this is like a completely modular system, where as an engineer, you can just add anything as a plugin. And maybe Isan wants to speak to it more, but you can add things as plugins. And so as an engineer, you're like kind of fully freed up to like ship stuff into the product. So that's one interesting thing that we've done on the product design side. Isan, did you want to add something? I saw you grab the mic. So
yeah, I grabbed the mic because I wanted to. Is this on?
No.
Okay, now it's on.
There you go.
I just wanted to like talk to both a personal anecdote of both the management style that both you commented on and how I approached the design of this. Because yeah, as Kanjun said, there's like 11 new projects. And that should be terrifying. And I think it was terrifying at first for me as like a team of one. I'm like, okay, gotta hire. But I think I had a moment of like, okay, what am I doing? What's gonna happen? And then I definitely put my head down and went into like build mode. And I think that's been like liberating in a way of like not worrying about all the details and letting these DRIs that we have, the directly responsible individuals, sort of guide the work. And
they're all engineers.
Yeah, and they're all engineers, and they come to me when they need me, and I'm just have to be comfortable with that discomfort, and I can be much more of an advisor and like a guide than ever in the past. So I think that's like something I wasn't expecting, and yeah, Milan is sitting back there. He's been building a tool, and like that was like a really successful thing where I thought I was going to open up Figma to like work on his tool, and every time we would check in, I'd be like, okay, next time I'm going to open up Figma and make some mock-ups. But we would just chat about it, and then he'd go off and build, and I'd be like, okay, I still don't need to open up Figma.
Yeah, I think actually what happened was that you guys were talking, and Milan like prompted Cloud Code to like update in real time, and then you were basically prototyping in real time with actual code.
Yeah, so I just wanted to grab the mic to say like, sometimes CEO has a perspective, right? And I just wanted to be like, okay, my lived experience like matches what Kanjun is saying. It's like, I'm not panicking. I'm not like,
Thank
we
you
need
for the
to
validation.
hire. Yeah, I think there's like this fundamental shift, and I don't fully understand it yet. This might go horribly wrong. I might regret it. But for now, I'm trying to like ride that discomfort.
Yeah, and there's something really interesting about what you did. Like, I didn't expect Asan to turn Sculptor into a pluggable product, where like as an engineer, any engineer, and we'll probably like end up shipping an open source version of it where any engineer can add a plugin. But it's an interesting perspective as a designer, which is now, code is so easy to write. Code is basically like anytime anything economically goes from being super expensive to super cheap, a lot of things change. And so now code has gone from being super expensive to super cheap. And so like there's something about the model of software and how we imagine software as this monolithic thing that I think as designers we want to rethink. Like, because now I'm thinking, okay, for all the projects, like all of our projects take 2 weeks. We have 5 things shipping in the next week. So if all of our projects takes 2 weeks, like, am I going to charge for this? Or am I just going to open up the source code, make it source available, make it so end users can add their own plugins, and like you see things like OpenClaw like grow like crazy because of that. And so I think there's just something interesting from a designer's perspective of how do you design a product experience that feels cohesive and coherent, but can enable the end user to modify their experience almost arbitrarily, because now they can just, actually the product can ship with a Claude code or a codex that in the product can modify its own source code. I think there's something really interesting there.
Yeah, I think personally, there's this question about like, hey, what's going to happen to all these roles? Are they really going to combine? I think the way I think about it is like, look, if you want to ship a great product, there's certain skill sets that you need to have. And when I say skills, I don't mean as much as we mentioned, like, actually producing the thing is getting cheaper and cheaper with AI. But I think the thing that probably still matters a lot is like, how do you know what excellent looks like, right? Do you know what, like, if you think this thing is performant, but it's really not because, the system can go much better, then clearly the person who has an ability to say, like, actually the bar should be here is going to produce a better product. And similarly, I think it's true, like, if everyone can now build, like, you still need to know, like, well, is this good? Like, is this important? Is this going to resonate with users, right? And I think that this is what I mean by like skills, like and maybe you can call that taste, or you can call that like the eye for excellence. I think this is the thing that still is the limiting factor. And so when I think about teams, and this is where I go back to, like, I love the idea of like teams of 2, teams of 3, because you don't really need like 5 people who all have a different skill set on the doing, but now you just need enough people where there is actually, you still need someone to be able to say, actually, this is going to be a great user experience. Because at the end of the day, a user is still going to use it. And if they don't have that eye or that ability, then you know what? We can build the thing, but it's still not going to do what it's supposed to do, right? It's not going to be successful. It's not going to be useful to anyone. And so I think similarly, like now, again, we talked about one of these, maybe you could call them a new meta skill that we need to get good at, which is like modularity, or like how do you design things in a way that it actually scales and it can support rapid development, right? And like that's its next level of a problem. And that's still like it's got a problem where I feel like kind of the best systems designers or the best systems types of engineers, like that's like often that skill can be applicable, or that eye can be applicable to this new layer. And now you kind of have to figure out the new tools to do this in the right way. But it sort of feels like the way, like the ability to understand what is really great and where to push the boundary, it's like the boundary is changing, but it still is a game of trying to continue to do work there. So I think that for my designers, I'm like, hey, you guys could also be building. Like, you don't need to now wait around for engineers.
Yeah, like Asan ships a bunch of PRs all the time.
Exactly, yeah. And there's experiments to be had of like, how can you, like if you build a thing and it doesn't quite work, right? Like it goes back to like, can you debug why it doesn't? Can you prompt in a better way? Can you figure out like how to, and then I go back to, engineers, like, hey, is our code base modular enough such that it's easy for anybody, including designers, to be able to say this is what I want to build and get something good. But everyone can be experimenting, and everybody, I think, can be building. And so I do expect that the next generation of designers, like we're all just going to be builders. And we still may have, again, certain areas where we can have a better eye towards like what great looks like. But like there's no reason why like we should think about design as just like, I think actually Figma is probably one of those areas where like more and more I expect designers to go straight into Cloud Code or something else, and just that's like where they start, right? And that's like they have sample pieces of code for like the kinds of interactions that they want, and then they kind of direct the agent to use these samples or these libraries of things to create new things, and that's kind of like the arena in which you're working.
Yeah, there's something really interesting in what you said about. I think there was a question about whether design, PM, and engineering will all be one person or one function, and from my perspective, the answer is like kind of yes, but a different role is more useful for different products. So for us internally, we have some products that are very, very technical, where if you're not like a systems engineer of 15 years, like you'll make a bunch of mistakes, or you won't have a very good solution. Claude won't know the magical answer. And in that situation, I think like the engineer is both the engineer and the designer, and the user is an engineer, so they like understand the user. They have the taste. Whereas there are some product areas where, as a designer, you maybe have taste in that area, and like you can now be full stack. You either don't need to like have deep engineering expertise, or you have an engineer partner that you're working with who like can help you architect the system. And so maybe that team is a team of two. I think the PM role of like needing to coordinate between everyone, I was a PM once upon a time, and I think actually a lot of that goes away, fortunately. That like, there is a kind of like part of the PM role that doesn't go away, which is about understanding users, prioritization of what seems to have impact to users, running experiments, designing experiments, and like that piece. But it feels to me like teams are just going to be so much smaller that hopefully the PM role can shift such that the like stakeholder alignment piece is a lot less effortful, and the actually talking to users and understanding them is a lot more of the work. And I think the most effective teams will have their PMs focusing much more on that and much less on the alignment, because the teams will be smaller. At least that's what we experience internally. And then there's a second piece on modularity that I think is interesting, and I'd be curious to hear people's thoughts over dinner on, which is I'm really personally interested in a future world where software is modifiable by the end user. That doesn't mean that all end users will modify software, but I do think it's possible for the end user to modify software if the software is well designed. And I also think that there's a potential kind of like extremely awesome value prop for software that is designed to be modifiable by the end user. Where that kind of product may win over products where it's not modifiable, to your workflow. And so, as a designer, maybe it's a new skill set. Maybe it's an engineer-designer pair. But thinking about how do we build interfaces, both software interfaces and also user experience interfaces that let users modify software to their experience in a way that, doesn't make it bug-ridden, doesn't mess with their experience, doesn't introduce security vulnerabilities. There's a really interesting new form of software that I think is possible here.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because to me, like a small example of that is already, if you use any of the agents, the major agents, right? They allow you to personalize, and you can say, hey, like I want you to write bullet points. I want you to, don't flatter me, et cetera, et cetera. And like that is a kind of personalization already. And I think the ability to direct more of like the experience, I think obviously in the design industry, we've always like talked about this kind of holy grail of like, will all, UI be personalizable? And I'm not sure people really want that. I mean, if you look at even where the industry has gone, like we've kind of gravitated towards the patterns that work best, right? There was like a lot more invention of like, should we do tabs or should we do, and then eventually everyone's like, no, this just works. Everyone like gets it. This is like, more universal, and like, it's just easier to standardize. So I'm not really sure people like really, like that many people in the world, I mean, some, but not that many really want to like somehow like personalize the experience to a great degree that's like super bespoke. But I do think personalization around like memory and like what is the way that, like what's most important to me when I come to use this this service or this application, understand my context, right? Like, what is my job? What am I really trying to do? And like, again, we all have very individual things that we're asked to do, and different companies are like that kind of context. I think is so important to helping make the experience like that much smarter, that much more richer for the person. So it just goes back to like, I think the design problem goes to like higher and higher meta levels of solving for design, while still possibly using a lot of the core pieces that are like from an interface perspective that are tried and true.
Yeah, on the memory piece, something I've been thinking about, and I'm also curious for y'all's thoughts as designers is, I'm not sure if this claim is true, so I'm going to make a claim. And the claim is something like, if I'm optimizing for user agency and human agency, what we want is for agent memories to be stored mostly locally, so in like flat files where I can have my agent, any agent, like work with those memories and work with that data. And maybe actually what we want is for most data to be stored locally and to be able to be pulled locally so that I can have my local agents like process all of that data. I can go access it and see what's going on. And like maybe files will be a thing again, because if stuff is not stored locally, it's a little bit harder to access that data. Like, where do I store it? I guess I could store it in a database on a hosted server somewhere, or put it in Excel or like in Google Sheets. And so there's something interesting about like the kind of like going back to a fully local experience that users own, that I think we've kind of gone away from in this most recent software shift. And when I think about the next 10 years or next 5 years even, like there's something very interesting here from a design perspective of what we can unlock when the user has full power and control over all of their data, all of their software, and all of their workflows, and they have agents that they can run, like triggers on and like do full workflows with that data on. I think like software is just data and UI that lets you do business logic workflows. So like agents can consume or eat a lot of that. So I think that's an interesting design question.
Actually, you mentioned earlier that you had your own predictions about where things are going to be at the end of the year. I'm really curious what those are in terms of how good agents are going to get.
Yeah, I think I do have predictions. I think maybe I should write them down more concretely. But one example is I think that, so right now, for example, like many of our engineers who are using Claude day to day, really, and it is primarily Claude. Like Claude is really good. Using Claude day to day, they can build a fairly complex system. Like, one of our engineers, Josh, my co-founder, wrote 50,000 lines of code in a week and a half, so 10 days. That's usually, it would take like a team of people 6 months to do that. He did that with quite a bit of steering. I think by the end of the year, Claude could probably do most of what he did. If he just wrote a lot of he wrote a lot of style guide, the spec, determining a lot of the behavior up front, and also did quite a bit of babysitting. I think that, the Claude will be fairly autonomous in doing that by the end of the year, especially if it's running with we have a verifier agent that we're going to ship soon. And especially running with a verifier where it's like fixing everything that the verifier's detecting being a problem. That loop is just really powerful. And so, with like pretty low guidance and some sense of how you might want to architect a system, you should have an agent that can autonomously build software. So, as a designer, like that should imply that, okay, if you want some behavior and you have some notion or like some sense of how you want to architect the system, then you're in pretty good shape.
What do you think is not going to change?
I'm curious about everyone else's thoughts on this, but my personal thinking is that in design in particular, like there's an element of taste that's about like what kind of experience resonates with an end user and is not confusing. And it's not clear to me at all. I think Joel had a question of how do I as a designer become a 10x designer or like a 100x designer? The models aren't making me a 10x or a 100x designer, but it's hard to fight for thinking time. I actually think that thinking time is much more, like becoming much more important, where because the bottleneck is not execution anymore, like we should be taking a lot more of that thinking time to figure out like, okay, what are experiences that resonate with the people I'm trying to reach? That's like one piece is like what resonates with people and like how do I design for people in a way that makes sense to them, especially since interfaces are most likely going to change a lot. The second question is, and maybe this is more my like I have an engineering background, I'm not a designer. Maybe this is more my engineering mentality, but I really think there's something interesting about products that are highly modular, like more like Lego blocks that people can assemble for their own workflows. I think agents allow software to be much more customizable, not in the like old school, like, you know, if it's customizable, it's super complex way. I think there are actually much simpler building blocks that let us customize workflows. So as a designer thinking about like, what are those blocks? As an engineer thinking about what are those blocks, you know, still designing and defining the blocks, the interfaces that can be assembled. That's like I don't think that that's a problem. Like the abstraction problem, like defining those abstractions is not necessarily a problem that AI systems are that good at, in my experience right now. Maybe in 3 years, that's no longer true, but not this year. What do you think?
We were talking about this earlier around context and like the way that I think we can better personalize experiences is just by like having more context about the human, what is it that they want, what is their goals. But I think if you follow that train, eventually you get back to like, well, what are the goals? And then, like you get back to like, what does this person really care about? And like, what are their core values? And actually I think that's still the hard thing. I think all of us actually having time to sit down and like know what is it do we want from life, right? Not just like today or tomorrow, or like the thing that's like shining in front of us, but like what is like, what is that ultimately? Because I think if we ourselves are not fully aligned or clear on that, then all of the instructions that we're going to give, agents or whatever, the tools can get better, but then they'll likely still be at cross purposes. I think about this a lot too, because now leading a company, like one of the hardest things, and when I look back on mistakes we've made, it's usually because I didn't really have clarity. I just didn't really have clarity, and I was hedging, and I was trying to do 5 different things, and it just the values of what we were trying to do, and the North Star just wasn't clear. And when things are clear, just a lot of stuff happens, but it's towards what end? And I still think that's a hard question, right? Yes, we can do more, but there's going to be a lot of stuff out there that I think get made without maybe a real sense of meaning or depth or purpose. And I still think that is a human constraint, right? It's do we have clarity? Do we know what we stand for? Do we know where we want the world to be? Are we reacting? And I worry that now because there's so much more uncertainty, I feel I react a lot. I'm just this thing came out, what are we gonna do about that, And having maybe we were saying before, space or time or to just ask ourselves the bigger questions because those are not changing. And that, I think somehow if everybody went and did that, we'll all probably come back with so much more maybe enthusiasm or excitement or optimism or an ability to be this is what all of this better tooling and better ability to move quickly can help us do.
I resonate with this so much. Actually, there was a question about how do I make sure my team is still thinking critically and things like that. Leslie, maybe that was you. I think Imbue, my experience has been like yours. As a founder, the entire company's ability to make progress, whether or not the company is just treading water or actually making serious progress, is completely correlated with how clear I feel about what's super important. And I think in this world where execution is becoming cheap, in a way, everyone is becoming a founder. Everyone is the founder of their area, and your clarity as a designer or an engineer or a product person, your clarity matters so much more. Your sense of focus matters so much more. And so whether or not your team or your company is making progress, I think is going to be much more directly correlated with how clear you are on what's important. And Claude doesn't know. Claude can't make a coherent strategic plan that is super clear on the thing that you really care about because it doesn't have necessarily the level of depth and context on what you really care about. You're expressing something that only you really understand. So yeah, I really resonate with that point on clarity. So like maybe like help all your teams have a lot more space to think and like only use AI to execute. That was my challenge to my team for this year is like, can we have only 30 people forever and like scale ourselves with AI forever? That's like kind of the challenge.
I love that. I think that's actually a great segue to turn it towards the audience. I would love to see if they have any questions, any further questions before we move to the dinner table.
Or comments.
Or comments.
And then we can go to dinner. We'll limit it because having a 30-person single-threaded conversation is not always that fun. But
hello? Okay. Yes? Okay. Just a note on what you were just talking about. I think what's interesting, I saw the new like Ferrari design come out, and I think like it's interesting that like we went in UI, we went really flat, and then in electric cars, we went no noise, no, like everyone has a big iPad. And now we're going back where everyone's like, I want a knob to move the volume. Like, I do not want to tap this button as I'm driving. I want to push the move the knob. So I think when we think about like we want knobs again and all this physical stuff, in the UI we put bevels back on everything because we just want to push the button. I think it's similar with AI. Like we're talking about building products with AI and making it really easy. But when you think about what humans want, like we'll swing one way and then people are going to want to touch the thing again. It's like, what does that look like? Kind of a question and a comment.
It's a great point. I really do feel like I was talking to actually a friend who works at Reddit, and she's like, Reddit's kind of like durable through AI because it's like more and more of a need to just be like, what are humans really talking about? And like, what's the niche side of like human dialogue and whatnot?
Right over here, you mentioned about like. We've solved design. I'm an engineer as well, and I've let Claude do a little bit of design for me now. But actually, going back to what we were saying about bevels and customization, generalized agents these days are able to write their own skills and extend themselves effectively, right? And so you sort of hinted at this. Is Sculptor going to become the sculpted, right? Like, is the agent going to be modifying my UI as I go, and so I can have it add, fun things? Where's Ehsan? Hello.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Simple answer. Okay.
Yes, in two ways, actually. I think the agent can add its own skills, although I do think that there's, again, something to like designing a skill where like, there's designing a skill is a design question also. Like what is a useful scope of thing that the skill encompasses. But skills are kind of like recipes. So the agent can definitely write its own recipes that it can call over and over again. And then the second thing is like, yes, the agent can definitely write its own plugins. Actually, we have a command line only. Josh is building something we call Manager. It's not shipped yet, but will be in pretty soon. That's basically a command line utility that lets you run an entire team of AI engineers. And that thing has a plugin system where the agents write its own plugins. And so it's actually pretty awesome to see what Josh does with it. It's like crazy, really crazy, the kinds of things that you can do.
I got a comment I want to add to what Julie said. It feels like when I started my career, it was like, oh, if I just had the gas in my tank, I would go all these places. And now it's like my gas tank is super full and I'm like, I don't know where to go anymore because now it's so easy to get to these places that when you're building these tools and you're looking at what everybody's building, it just feels like you're almost in this weird space of, well, maybe I need to spend more time working on this. But I really think the answer is taking the time, like you said. I thought about that. And that's why this resonates is recently I was like, maybe I just need to take some time to just chill. I'm spending so much time trying to watch every YouTube video. I'm trying to try every new rollout that comes out. I'm trying to learn every new software, but I don't know where I'm putting all of that knowledge I'm learning versus I focus on this is what I want to do. Now let me figure out how to use all these tools to get there. So I think we are at this weird space of we need to just take a second and figure out what we want to do and then use the technology to support us to get there. Because if not, it feels so easy to be consumed in, I need to be using Sculptor and Codex and Claudex and this and that and this and that.
Yeah, like two philosophical comments there. One is that I think now that like, you know, attention as a human living life, attention is the only resource I have. That is my life, what I pay attention to. And now that things are much easier to do, instead of me going to do them, like thinking about what I want for life, what I want to spend my attention on, that seems more and more important. Like we don't have to be these cogs as much. So it's very liberating in a way. And like, we want to think a little bit about like, okay, where do we want AI to actually go? That's what, you know, at Imbue, I'm like, it's kind of radical to say, hey, like, we have an opinion on where we want AI to go. We think it should serve humans and like not just do this like, you know, hyper growth machine, follow the existing incentive system. I think it's worth more and more people thinking about, like taking a step back and thinking really critically about like, let me get myself out of this like startup incentive ecosystem and like think about like, what do I want my technology to do for me as a person, for humanity as a species? Yeah. Okay, let's eat dinner.